In this video, we'll go over the complete list of individuals scheduled for execution in March 2025 on death row in the United States. Initially, 3 executions were scheduled, but in the past few days, 3 added. Brad Keith Sigmon, State, South Carolina. Brad Sigmon and Rebecca Barber had been in a 3-year relationship and lived together, but in early 2001, she ended things and moved in with her parents. Sigmon, obsessed, began stalking her and insisting they get back together. The night before the crime, Sigmon took JS with his friend Eugene Straba, to whom he revealed his plan to break into the Lara home, tie up her parents, and force Barber to talk to him. Straba refused to participate, but Sigmon went ahead alone. The next morning, he broke into the house and brutally attacked David and Gladys with a baseball bat, struck them repeatedly in the head until they died. He then stole David's gun and waited for Barbara to return. When Barber arrived, Sigmon threatened her with the gun and forced her into his car. He planned to take her to North Carolina, but she managed to jump out and escape, though he fired at her as she ran. Barber survived and was hospitalized. Police launched a manhunt and issued arrest warrants for murder, kidnapping, and assault with intent to kill. Brad Sigmon's trial began on July 18, 2002 in South Carolina. From the first day, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence against him, including the baseball bat used to take the lives of David and Gladys Lark. During the trial, Brad Sigmon displayed photographs of Rebecca Barber for no apparent reason, confusing those in the courtroom. That same day, the jury sentenced him to death. As the decision was read, his mother, Virginia Wooten, broke down in tears, while Rebecca Barber watched in silence. Sigmon looked at her one last time before being escorted out of the courtroom. It has been 23 years since Brad Sigmon was sentenced to death. For 2 decades on death row, he filed multiple appeals, but all were denied. Finally, his execution was scheduled for March 7th. Brad Sigmon chose the firing squad over lethal injection. His attorneys argued that he made this decision due to concerns raised after recent executions involving a massive dose of pantobarbal. While witnesses stated that inmates appeared to lose consciousness within minutes, reports indicated they were not pronounced dead until at least 20 minutes later. In 2022, South Carolina spent approximately $54,000 to construct a firing squad chamber inside its execution facility, David Leonard Wood, State, Texas, in 1976. Wood was arrested and convicted of indecency with a minor, receiving a 5-year prison sentence. He served approximately 2 years before being released in 1978. In 1980, he committed 2 rapes in El Paso, one against a 19-year-old woman and another against a 13-year-old girl. For these offenses, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but served only 6 years before being released on parole in 1987. After his release, he began working at a furniture store in El Paso. That same year, 9 women, ranging in age from 13 to 24, disappeared in El Paso. On October 23rd of that year, Wood was arrested for the kidnapping and rape of Kelling. His arrest led police to discover more bodies and gather circumstantial evidence, such as fibers that match those of the victims, as well as testimony from other inmates who claimed Wood bragged about his crimes. He was charged with the murders of several women, although the fate of some victims remains unclear during his trial, which was moved to Dallas due to media coverage in El Paso. Wood insisted on his innocence. In 1992, he was convicted of 6 murders and sentenced to death. Despite his attempts to delay the trial, the verdict was clear, and on January 14, 1993, he was sentenced to death. David Leonard Wood, 67, will be executed 2025. Christopher Cedillo, State, Louisiana. In March 1992, Christopher Cedillo murdered his 6-year-old stepson, Wesley Allen Mercer. The child had suffered an accident in the school bathroom, and upon returning home, Cedillo and his wife refused to let him change clothes or eat for 2 days. Finally, when Allen hesitated to get into the bathtub, Cedillo struck him with the handle of a screwdriver until he lost consciousness, then submerged him in boiling water. When he was taken to the hospital, the child had already passed away due to the burns. Cedillo was arrested and sentenced to death in 1993. For years, his execution was delayed while Louisiana reconsidered its stance on the death penalty. Eventually, his execution was scheduled for March 17, 2025. However, weeks before the scheduled date, Sato died of natural causes in the infirmary at the Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola at the age of 81. He was confined to a wheelchair and suffered from multiple ailments, including chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, a blocked artery in his brain, and gangrene that led to sepsis. His attorney, Shan Nolan, described his potential execution as simply barbaric, arguing that his health had already turned him into a small, fragile, and dying old man. The Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections confirmed his death, stating that he passed away due to pre-existing medical complications. Jesse D. Hoffman, Jr., State, Louisiana, on November 26, 1996, 18-year-old Jesse D. Hoffman, Jr. kidnapped 28-year-old Mary Elliott, an advertising executive in downtown New Orleans. After forcing her to withdraw money from an ATM, he drove her to a remote area in Placerville. At Stamey Parish, where he assaulted and ended her life, Hoffman was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During his trial, the jury found him guilty, and on September 11, 1998, he was sentenced to death. After more than 2 decades on death row, Hoffman's execution is scheduled for March 18, 2025 by nitrogen hypoxia. This would be Louisiana's first execution in over 15 years. Aaron Brian Guns. State, Arizona, on November 14, 2012, Aaron Brian Guns went to his girlfriend's house in Mesa, Arizona. Upon arrival, he forced Ted Price to get into his car with the supposed intention of taking him to a bus station. However, realizing he didn't have money for a ticket, he drove him to a desert area along the Bean Highway. There, he shot Price 4 times, ending his life. On January 15, 2003, an Arizona public safety officer stopped Guns at a traffic checkpoint. Guns fired twice at the officer before fleeing, leading to a chase involving more than 50 officers. He was arrested the following day, found hiding in a barn in Wendon in 2004. He pled guilty to the crime. And in 2008, he was sentenced to death. Since then, he has repeatedly requested his own execution and criticized the state for not carrying it out. Although his execution, scheduled for April 6, 2023, was postponed after new legal proceedings, the Arizona Supreme Court set his execution for March 19, 2025, by lethal injection. Edward James State, Florida. On the night of September 20, 1993, Edward James returned home after a party and found the grandchildren of Elizabeth Ann Betty Dick sleeping in the living room. He approached 9-year-old Toni Nooner and committed a violent act that left her unconscious. He then took her to a private area of the home where he assaulted her. Tragically, Toni later died from the injuries. Subsequently, James entered Betty Dick's bedroom and attacked her violently using a heavy object and a knife, inflicting severe injuries. The commotion alerted her 9-year-old granddaughter, Wendy, who entered the room. James restrained her before leaving the residence shortly after he fled in his car, taking some belongings with him. The case was featured on America's Most Wanted, which generated numerous calls with tips about his whereabouts. He was eventually captured on October 6 in 1993 at an unemployment office in Bakersfield, California. On April 5, 1995, James pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with other charges including aggravated child abuse and kidnapping. On August 18 of that same year, he was sentenced to death. He is currently held at Florida State Prison and is scheduled to be executed on March 2025. Wendell Arden Grom, State, Oklahoma. In November 2005, in Blaine County, Oklahoma, Wendell Grom and Johns, after drinking whiskey and discussing burglary plans, randomly chose a house to break into. Upon entering the residence, they encountered Drew Kopp, who was at the house with his 2 daughters and their friend Amber Matthews. Although Kopp attempted to negotiate, Grom shot him in the head. Matthews, attempting to escape with a baby, was struck by Grom, who shot him in the back of the head and then in the forehead. After the murders, Grom and Johns fled in a vehicle they found in the garage and were arrested at a nearby convenience store. At trial, Grom was convicted of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and other charges. Amber Matthews, 23, died while trying to protect the children, adding further tragedy to the crime. Johns was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Grom's execution is scheduled for